Okay, welcome back everybody to the live webinar here at BINA. So we're holding right now a week and a half before Rosh Hashanah, and always this Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah we read the parsha of Nitzavim. This week it's actually a double parsha, Nitzavim and Vayelech, but it's always Nitzavim. The parsha of Nitzavim starts off with the following verse: Atem Nitzavim hayoyim kulchem. Moshe Rabbeinu, in his final words to the Jewish people, is telling them, you are all standing here today before God. And he starts enumerating all the various types of groups of Jews. Mirashechem shiftechem, from heads of tribes, ad choitev eitzecha v'shoyev bimecha, all the way until the wood choppers and the water carriers. From the top to the bottom, all of you are standing here together before God. What are they standing here to do? So the verse continues, la'avrecha bibris, to come into, to pass into the covenant. So there are a number of questions here. First of all, why over here does it choose to enumerate all the different types of Jews? Why can't it just say, Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem, you're all standing here today? Why does it have to go and enumerate and explain, specify, Rashechem shiftechem, the heads of tribes, shoyev mimecha, water carriers, wood choppers? Why is this important for what we're talking about over here? Number two, what exactly is this covenant? Didn't the Jewish people already enter into a covenant when they stood at Mount Sinai and committed themselves to do God's will and keep God's Torah? What exactly is the novelty of this covenant? What did this covenant add to their commitment? And number three, if you look at the expression here, throughout the entire verse, it's in plural. Atem, which means you in plural, when you're talking to many people, which Moshe Rabbeinu was. He was talking to many people. And all the rest of it. Rashechem, your heads. But then when it talks about going into the covenant, it says la'avrecha, which means you in singular. Why the sudden change of grammar? So the commentaries, among them the Kli Yakar, explain the following. This covenant added, the addition of this covenant over what they already had committed themselves at Mount Sinai, was the concept of arvus. Arvus means collective responsibility. That Kol Yisrael arevim zeh bazeh, that every Jew is responsible for every single other Jew. What someone else does, if they do something wrong, I will be blamed for it, because I am responsible to make sure that everyone is doing the right thing. Why is this taking place right now? So the Kli Yakar says they're about to go into the land of Israel. They're about to establish a Jewish society. A society in general, and more specifically a Jewish society, can only flourish and can only really survive if everybody feels responsible for one another. Because if I just say, I'll worry about myself, you worry about yourself, as long as I'm doing the right thing, everything's good, and I don't feel any push, I don't feel any responsibility to look out for somebody else, to see what they're doing, a lot of times what happens is people fall by the wayside, people fall away, and no one cares about them because everyone is just focusing inward and just focusing on themselves. And therefore, the Torah tells us over here, you are all standing here today to go into a covenant. Which covenant? A covenant that you will all become responsible for one another. And even if someone else does something wrong, you will also be punished because we are all responsible for the other person. However, there's one exception seemingly. If someone does something wrong within the confines of their own home, how am I even supposed to know that they're doing something wrong? If someone goes and does something publicly, then I can go and try fix it. I can try talk to them, try to convince them otherwise. But if someone's doing something in the privacy of their own home, how can I be held responsible for such a thing? And the truth is, I'm not. Most people are not. However, says the Kli Yakar, there are some people which are. The leaders of the Jewish nation will be held responsible even for what people do when they're hidden, when they're in secret. Because it is up to them to inspire the entire nation. The fact that there's somebody doing something wrong, they are blamed, the leaders are blamed because they should have inspired everybody properly. And that's why the verse enumerates all the various categories of Jews. to tell us that we are responsible for every single last Jew, for what every single person does. We should care and we should be responsible for what everyone else does. But in the order is that the first thing it says is Roshechem Shiftechem, the heads of tribes, because they are held the most accountable, they are the most responsible, because it is up to them to inspire everybody else. And that is why, when it talks about coming into the covenant, it says La'avrecha, which means singular, you will pass through, but singular. Because what it's telling us is that through this covenant of Atem Nitzavim Mayoim Kulchem, of standing here today before God, we are all becoming like one body, like one person. And just like by one person, if my hand hurts, it bothers my foot as well. So too, if there's one Jew who's not doing the right thing, it should bother me as well, even though I'm a different limb. But la'avrecha, singular to you, because we're all considered from now on, from here and onwards, from this covenant and onwards, we are all considered like one body. What does this mean practically? And especially now, before we come to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot. In last week's parsha, the first mitzvah of last week's parsha, in Parshas Kisavai, was the mitzvah of Bikurim. Bikurim is that when someone is a farmer and they have fruits, they're growing fruits, the first fruits that grow on the tree are called Bikurim, the first fruit to ripen. And we are commanded to take those fruits to the temple and give it to the Kohen, and it's a sign of gratitude to God that we are thanking God for the blessing of having these fruits. However, the verse tells us, when did the Jewish people become obligated in fulfilling this mitzvah? The verse in last week's parsha tells us, V'yirishta v'yoshafta ba, when you will be totally settled in the land. And like Rashi explains, this comes to tell me that when did they become obligated in Bikurim? When did they have to bring their first fruits to the temple? Only after the entire land was conquered and the entire land of Israel was divided. That took an entirety of 14 years to do that. Until then, even if someone planted a tree, they would not be obligated to bring Bikurim. That sounds strange. Why? Let's say I got my portion at the beginning of the 7 years of divide. It took 7 years to conquer and 7 years to divide. So if I got my land first, why shouldn't I have to bring Bikurim from my own trees, even though there may be other people who haven't got their land yet, but I have my land? Why should I have to wait till everybody gets their land in order to be obligated to bring these Bikurim? And there's a fascinating, very important explanation that is given. And that is, when someone brings Bikurim, what they're saying is that I'm enjoying my fruits, and therefore I have to thank God for that enjoyment, for being able to enjoy the fruits that I have planted. How can I properly enjoy what I have if somebody else doesn't have it yet? If there is still one person left who has not gotten their land in the land of Israel, how can I come to God and say, thank you for giving me this enjoyment in my fruits? How can I properly enjoy myself if there's somebody else who is still lacking? And perhaps we can apply this principle in two areas of our life, and especially when it comes to the festivals, both physically and spiritually. First of all, physically. We all know that the month of Tishrei, the month which we're all coming upon, is very expensive. Every festival, of course, as Jews, everything is focused around food always. And especially when it comes to the holiday of Sukkot, there's a lulav and there's an etrog and there's all the 4 species and there's the building a sukkah and there's the various holiday foods, and altogether it can be very expensive. And unfortunately, there are people which are in need. What we have to think about is, how can we sit down to our Yom Tov tables? How can we sit down and enjoy ourselves when there are people that are still in need? And therefore our sages instituted an idea called Ma'ois Chitim, which means that before every festival we are commanded to give extra charity to find a poor person, either if we know someone directly or go to community organizations which do this, and give out charity to poor people in our community and communities around the world to be able to properly enjoy their festival. And as the Rambam, Maimonides, tells us, that if somebody sits down to a festival meal and there isn't sitting by the table orphans and people which are in need, downtrodden people, and you are not trying to make them happy as well, your happiness, he says, is not true joy. It's not the joy of a mitzvah. He calls it simchas kresoi. It's the joy of your stomach. It's selfish joy. It's not real joy. And therefore, whether that means literally we need to have these people by our table, which is also a good thing to invite guests, or figuratively speaking, to literally give charity to people so they should have what to eat over Yom Tov, it is definitely something to think about before we come to Tishrei. But included in this is also the spiritual aspect. There is so much spirituality in the month of Tishrei. There's Rosh Hashanah, we come to Shul and we hear Shofar, we hear an inspiring drasha hopefully, and Yom Kippur, we come to Shul, we spend an entire 24 hours in Shul. And Sukkot, we shake the lulav and esrog and we're happy, we dance, we sing. And it's an unbelievably spiritually fulfilling experience. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, how can we be spiritually satisfied if there are so many Jews who aren't? We have to all look at ourselves and think that we have a responsibility that not only that I should hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, but another Jew should also hear shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Not only I should come to Shul on Yom Kippur, but I should try to convince another Jew to come with me. Share that spiritual enjoyment, share that spiritual light with somebody else. On Sukkot, invite someone into your sukkah to make a blessing and fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. Invite someone to shake the lulav and ethrog. Obviously, we can't change thousands of people, but we can all do one person at a time. Try and spread that light. Don't keep it for yourself. Don't be selfish. Have true joy in the month of Tishrei. Have true spirituality, and it shouldn't be at all selfish. Have a wonderful day.